Rome is not just a city, not just a century-old empire, but an entire era that still lives in our minds. What was it about this small settlement on the banks of the Tiber that allowed it to survive the centuries and become the greatest empire, stretching from Britain to Egypt, from the Piraeus to Mesopotamia? How was Rome, with its fierce political struggles and dramatic wars, able to make such a leap from village to great power that even the most powerful nations feared in the last centuries of its existence? The answers to these questions lie at the heart of one of the most amazing stories in world history. But it all began with the most ordinary people, in the most unlikely of circumstances, in the hills where sheep once grazed, and now the fate of an entire world was being decided. The founding of Rome, legend and reality. Every great state had to go through its own mysterious and sometimes violent beginnings before becoming an empire. Rome was no exception. According to legend, Romulus and Remus, two twins, sons of the god Mars, were rescued by a she-wolf and raised by a shepherd. But this legend is nothing more than a symbol. Like most myths of antiquity, it hides tragedy and struggle. The history of Rome is not just about survival, but a constant war for influence, dominance, and power. Rome was once a small settlement standing on 7 hills by the Tiber River. But on these hills battles were fought, ambitions were harbored, and the foundations were laid for what would later become one of the most powerful nations on the planet. The Roman Republic, a system that collapsed from within after the overthrow of the kings. In 509 BC, Rome becomes a republic. Instead of a single ruler, there is a senate, elected magistrates, and popular assemblies. The Roman Republic was an experiment, a test of strength where power was shared, but the ambitions of the rulers grew every year. However, it was not only external enemies that stood in Rome's way. The worst enemies lurked within. At first, it was a struggle between aristocrats and ordinary citizens, patricians and plebeians. On the one hand, the rich nobility, which had power; on the other, the people, which every year became more and more, and who demanded their share. When in 494 BC plebeians put forward their demands and organized a revolt, the republic almost collapsed. But the internal conflicts didn't end there. Remember the bloody battles that were fought for a place in the Senate, as the ambitions of individual magistrates threatened the very existence of Rome. After all, the Republic, where everyone could claim power, it was always a deadly game. The Punic Wars, the struggle for dominance in the Mediterranean Sea. External enemies were not slumbering. Rome's fame spread quickly, but to become a true superpower, Rome needed to win one of the most brutal wars imaginable. These were the Punic Wars with Carthage, which at the time was one of the most powerful states in the Mediterranean. The First Punic War, 264 to 241 BC, was a real test for Rome. They fought on the sea, where the Carthaginians were unrivaled masters. But the Romans, with incredible determination and tenacity, built their fleet and won. This was the first step towards their emergence as a maritime power. The Second Punic War, 218 to 201 BC, was even more brutal. The Carthaginian general Hannibal took the war into Italy with an incredible march across the Alps. His army, with war elephants, brought Rome to the brink of destruction. In the battles of Lake Trasimeno and Cannae, the Romans suffered monstrous defeats. But Rome did not give up, and eventually, led by the general Publius Cornelius Scipio, Rome defeated Carthage in the decisive Battle of Zama. These victories gave Rome control of the Mediterranean and vast resources that would be used for future conquests. Caesar, the road to power and the fall of the Republic. However, internal problems continued to mount. The Republic was on the verge of collapse. Caesar, an outstanding military leader and politician, entered the struggle for power, and his personal ambitions led to one of the most dramatic eras in Roman history. In 49 BC, Caesar crossed the Rubicon, the river that separated his army from Rome. His famous phrase, "The die is cast," came to symbolize that Rome was no longer a place of political debate. Its future was decided on the battlefield. The civil war that Caesar unleashed consumed Rome, and although Caesar became dictator, he never had time to realize his ambitions fully. In 44 BC, he was assassinated in the Senate. Roman Empire. The rise of Octavian. After Caesar's assassination, another civil war broke out. However, young Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, enters the arena and skillfully manipulated political alliances and wars. In 31 BC, Octavian won a decisive victory over Mark Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. This marked the end of the Republican era. Octavian became the first Roman emperor, taking the title Augustus, which meant greatness. Rome became an empire, and he became its immortal ruler, laying the foundation for the Pax Romana, a long period of peace and prosperity. Rome begins to expand even more, and its influence reaches the limits of the world known at that time. Conclusion: the legacy of the Roman Empire. The history of the Roman Empire is not just a chronicle of victories and defeats, but an amazing journey from a small settlement on the Tiber to the greatest empire that left an indelible mark on world history. This empire lasted more than 5 centuries, but its legacy is still alive today, permeating the culture, politics, and philosophy of our time. Rome didn't just conquer new territories, it conquered the minds and hearts of people, creating a system that was initially exceptional and ambitious. When we look back on the Roman Empire, it is hard not to marvel at its achievements. It gave the world the fundamental foundations of law that are still used in most modern legal systems today. Roman law became the basis for a legal tradition that epitomizes justice, the protection of citizens' rights, and the obligation of states to their peoples. Many concepts, such as civil rights, human rights, and democracy, trace back to Roman roots. But it was not only legal structures and laws that left us a legacy. Great Roman architecture, engineering, and urbanism turned Rome into a symbol of progress. Aqueducts, bridges, roads, amphitheaters, and magnificent temples all became not only functional, but also incredibly beautiful works of art that inspired generations, some of which still stand today as monuments to Rome's greatness. You can understand the scale of Roman achievement when you imagine that many modern cities still use Roman water supply and road network technologies from antiquity. Roman culture, art, literature, philosophy, all this has passed through the centuries, overcome the tests of time, and survived. Roman mythology and philosophy influenced Renaissance thinkers, and even today the names of philosophers like Seneca or Cicero remain famous and important. Eventually, the very idea of Roman civilization became a symbol of high cultural and intellectual level, and many countries, admiring Rome, sought to follow its example. However, the Roman Empire was also an example of tragic decline. Internal conflicts, political instability, economic problems, and barbarian invasions all led to its downfall. But it was out of these events that a new understanding of political and social organization was born that would soon inspire future nations. Roman civilization left behind not only ashes and ruins, but also new forms of governance that would be used throughout human history. In some aspects, Rome never disappeared. The empire, as a concept, continued to live on in European countries that tried to adopt its ideals and methods of governance. Rome became a symbol of power and prosperity, and its legacy was borrowed and adapted to create new, more modern and democratic states. The Roman spirit continues to live in us today, albeit under different banners. Thus, through wars and civil conflicts, through great victories and tragic defeats, Rome has become an important lesson for humanity, a lesson in how from a small idea and determination, something great can be created that will influence the world for centuries to come. Despite its demise, Rome has not disappeared. It has become a part of us, continues to live on in our culture, our laws, our architecture, and even our ideas about government and the state. The Roman Empire may be destroyed, its capital may be destroyed, but its spirit, its ideas, and its achievements live on in us to this day. And this makes Rome one of the most majestic and eternal empires in human history.